Maverick News presents The Rick Walker Show. Defrag your mind.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rick Walker. Welcome back to the Maverick News channel. Tons of stuff to share with you tonight. We're not going to touch really too much on the National Citizens Inquiry into the government response to the pandemic because we've been broadcasting it all day. If you want to watch that, it's over on Rumble. You can check that out at any point. It will remain up as soon as the like eight plus hours of broadcasting. I think 9 hours today in total we were on with that. It'll probably have to process, and then you can watch all of that. It's up on Facebook as well right now. YouTube will be taking it down again on all the channels that we have over there. But we have a lot of other stuff to talk about. And the testimony at the NCI today, incredible. Again, Rick Nichols, former member of provincial parliament, telling his story about refusing to, get vaccinated, getting kicked out of the Conservative Party, essentially. And then later he ran provincially and lost when he ran for the Ontario Party. Pastors, church leaders talking about the impact that it had on their congregations, on their churches, financially, spiritually, legally, victim impact statements from people, including the guest that we had on last night who was on today. She shared her story about losing her business and struggling and the adverse reactions that she's had to the vaccine. You can watch all of that as well over on Rumble. There's still a lot of censorship going on, and there was talk about that as well today. Day 2 of the NCI in Toronto. Third day of testimony tomorrow, third and final day in Toronto. We will have that starting at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll be back on the air with it, and we will cover it all day again tomorrow because it is important. This inquiry is giving the people a voice that they really have not had through any other venue. So we're happy to provide that opportunity here as a conduit for the NCI and all of the people testifying. I think it's extremely important that that happens so that we have a have documentation of the inquiry and spread the information as far and wide as we possibly can so that the truth gets out there. And this is truth. Every witness testifying is taking an oath, swearing to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And this goes far beyond the Emergencies Act inquiry, which was singular in scope, in focus. It was simply an exercise, a review to determine if the government was justified in using the modern version of the War Measures Act against its own people just over a year ago. And we all know what the outcome of that was. Justice Rouleau said, yeah, that was okay. But this is broader. This actually deals with the pandemic, with the vaccines, with the government response overall. It looks at the bigger picture, and it gives the people an opportunity to speak. And yet we are not seeing any government participation. No health bureaucrats there. They've been invited to participate, and they are not coming around to offer up any testimony at all. Their side of the story, I guess they feel, has been told that they control the narrative. They don't need to participate in this. This is just the people. I guess they figure they're in charge. They don't need to take part in the People's Forum. Well, I disagree. I think this is more important than anything the government has run. At the end of it, you'll get a report and recommendations. The government may follow those recommendations or not. Most likely, they'll put it on a shelf or simply deposit it in the trash basket. But the truth will come out. It is coming out. Even the mainstream media that has been in collusion with the government throughout this has been called out during this inquiry, with former journalists suggesting, and current journalists actually, who have testified, saying that the CBC, now the state broadcaster, not just a government-funded broadcasting company, with the state broadcaster being called out as betraying the public. And I would agree with that, this in particular with regard to the way it has handled its coverage of the pandemic. But all of that is available online. You can go watch the whole thing front to back. We've been carrying it live every day. That's what we're here for. Other stories tonight. Trump watch continues. The indictment. We have former Attorney General Bill Barr with his reaction to that. We have Chinese interference in the Canadian elections, another huge story. There's a special committee looking at that, the Ethics Committee in Canada, and not getting very much attention again, but it should be getting a lot of attention. We'll give it some attention here tonight. Over half a dozen, I think 8. I think the death count is up to 8 people now found dead in a marsh on the St. Lawrence Seaway. It looks like those folks are trying to enter the United States illegally. We have information on that. MK Ultra, very controversial CIA program back in the 1950s. Canadians were involved in that. Some of them suffered severely. It is not a conspiracy theory. It's a real thing. They were mind control experiments, and there is an effort to get a class action lawsuit going on that. The United States is seeking immunity from that. We're going to talk about that a little bit, and we have a special interview, a special show coming up on that next week, because there again, we have real victims of real improper conduct by a government agency, by government itself, and it needs to have attention drawn to it. And again, that is why we are here. A woman was approached by a man in a parking lot, and it is now going viral, the video about it. We're going to show you the video, and we'll probably engage in discussion on that. Rogers, Shaw, 2 huge media companies in Canada merging. What does that mean for consumers, and how does that compare to what's going on in the United States? Also, the Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith, in, I guess, in a big political fight, being targeted by her NDP, that's the New Democratic Party in Alberta, targeting her aggressively because of promises she made to provide amnesty to people who were charged during the pandemic under government lockdown orders and so on, There's a private conversation that was released to the public, leaked. Don't know how it got out there. I have some suspicions. I'm not too impressed with the way that kind of went down from the way it looks anyway. So we may touch on that tonight. Vladimir Putin has a new foreign policy, and it flies in the face of this decades long, well, since World War II, this move for expansion of NATO and this liberal hegemony around the world flies in the face of all that. Western dominance shall be no more if Vladimir Putin gets his way. It's another move toward a multipolar geopolitical reality. And I think he's going to get what he wants, because there are new alliances being formed out there between Russia and other countries. Pierre Poilievre, leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, reacting to the appointment of an interim ethics commissioner, which has, and this new ethics commissioner has direct ties to the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. Poilievre has a response to that, and also a response from Poilievre on what happened last night. The Liberals ramming through Bill C-11. That's their censorship bill. What does that mean? What happens next? We have all of that coming up for you. Plus, Joe Biden heads to Mississippi to talk about the federal government's, the U.S. government's commitment to assist storm victims down there. Stay with me. All of that coming up right after all of this.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Donald Trump, the indictment. Trump watch continues. And this is what's going on now. I mean, it's like minute by minute, blow by blow reality TV. You know, it's just kind of boring. This is what the mainstream media is doing. I mean, they're just, here's a picture of Trump Tower. I get it, to a point. Like, what are you supposed to show? But this is top news tonight for the mainstream media. Live outside Trump Tower, where nothing is going on. You know, and I know that they have, you know, huge security measures in place as they prepare for Trump to arrive next week. It looks like he will give himself up. He won't be arrested. We're told that he will not be placed in handcuffs. So don't expect a perp walk. Don't expect to see him in cuffs and an orange jumpsuit being loaded into the back of a paddy wagon. It's not going to go down that way. He's going to arrive with his Secret Service. And I think what you'll see next week, and from everything we're hearing, it sounds like probably Tuesday will be the day when he turns himself in. So he'll go to New York. He'll turn himself in. He'll probably walk in, wave to the cameras. Reporters will shout. It'll be mayhem, and they'll fingerprint him, process him inside, where he will be informed of exactly what his rights are, etc. I don't think you'll see that portion on camera. Then he'll come back out. They'll have to arraign him in court. That'll be part of the process. At that point, then the information on exactly what those charges are will be released. So look for that, I think, on Tuesday. That's the information that we are getting. Between now and then, expect a lot more of this. Pictures of buildings. Ongoing live coverage from outside Mar-a-Lago. Just footage of buildings and a lot of political pundits on mainstream media talk shows talking about this. Look for this subject to dominate the Sunday political talk shows on television this weekend. That's what's going down out there in Trump land. And, there is no coming back from this. This, I think, is a terrible situation for the United States. It signals turbulent times ahead, I think. And this is designed not just to target Donald Trump. It isn't just about, and this is me editorializing, it isn't just about trying to prevent him from running for office. This is about trying to get a negative response from Trump supporters. They're poking the people on the right wing of the political establishment, or not so much the establishment, that's the wrong word. People on the political right. They're poking them in the eye to try and get, I think, some sort of violent response, frankly. And once they do that, it's like it's a trap. Because the politics has become dirty, dirtier than it has ever been before. And this is an exceedingly weak case, any way you look at it. It's politically motivated. It's thin. It's political theater. In the end, I don't think it will hurt Trump. He knows it, so he'll use it, as he should, for political purposes himself. He'll turn that into a public relations exercise. He already has. It will firm up his support among his supporters. It truly will. So look for all of that. Bill Barr, former Attorney General, appearing on Fox News, offering up his views on this tonight. And I think he's pretty much on the money. Barr served as Attorney General with Trump. And then they had a falling out at the end, the same way Pence did. Bill Barr, not exactly, he's his own man. Didn't follow Trump in the end. Served him well, it seemed, for a while, but never really went to town, right? Never fully backed him up. Well, tonight, I think he has a fair assessment of what this is all about. Here's Bill Barr on Fox News. Let's get that
Bill Barr, former Attorney General, twice Attorney General, former friend and cabinet colleague. Bill, thank you for coming on. Just start off, just tell me your impressions about this whole story. You heard my riff. I know you were talking to Andy McCarthy in National Review. What are you thinking here, Bill Barr?
Well, I agree with most of what you said, Larry. Now, obviously, we don't have the indictment, so there's a little bit of speculation involved. But based on the news reports, if they're accurate, this is an abomination. It's the epitome of the abuse of prosecutorial power to bring a case that would not be brought against anyone else. They are going after the man, not a crime. And the legal theory, frankly, is pathetically weak. The case is held together by, chicken wire and paper clips and rubber bands. It's a lousy case. It's a shame. It's a shameful episode in our history where this local prosecutor is trying to affect the political process by bringing this case.
This is politically driven, as you suggested. I think we all know that, or at least conservatives all know that. What is this tattered legal theory? I'm still trying to figure that out.
Well, according to news reports, the threshold crime is false business records, apparently reporting payments that were made to reimburse Michael Cohen, who had paid off Stormy Daniels, and the characterization of those payments as legal payments. And the claim is that that's false and therefore violated a misdemeanor statute in the first instance against false documents. I actually don't think that's a valid claim in this case because the statute actually requires that it be done with the intent to defraud. So if you have false business records, and you're committing insurance fraud or some other kind of fraud where some value is taken from somebody else and you falsely get value in your own name, then the false records would be a misdemeanor. But I don't understand the basis for a fraud claim here. But then they take this misdemeanor, which also has a problem with the statute of limitations, and they try to shoehorn it into a felony by claiming that the reason the documents were falsified, was to cover up another crime. In this case, they're assuming that the payments were a campaign finance violation because they were effectively a contribution to the Trump campaign. I can tell you that's not the law. I don't think that's how the Justice Department would view it. It wasn't brought by the Justice Department during the Trump administration, but even after the Trump administration left, there was no inhibition on the Department of Justice to bring this federal claim if they thought it was valid, and it was never brought. So aside from that, I think it's quite clear under the law that payment, I'm going to call it hush money. I don't like that term, but payments of hush monies to keep, affairs or other things like that secret are not inherently unlawful. The question under the statute is, was it a campaign contribution? I think the law is quite clear it is not. And in fact, I think Merrick Garland, when he was a D.C. Circuit judge, wrote an opinion along these lines relating to Senator Craig, Larry Craig. But put that aside, under the statute, it would be a personal payment, a payment of a personal expense, and that is not a violation of the statute if it's the kind of payment that would have been made even apart from the campaign. And I think there's a compelling argument here that when you're dealing with a private company that's named after its founder, it's an eponymous company, Trump, of course, there would be payment to protect the reputation of the owner of the corporation. So I think it's a weak case altogether. Unfortunately, I think it's going to accomplish what I think its political purpose, which is to inject chaos into the Republican process. I actually think probably the governing intent here is to help Trump and have all the news focused on this kind of stuff for the next couple of years, and turn the Republican primary into a circus.
I mean, is there any doubt? Maybe I'm overstating it in my opening. Is there any doubt that the basic thought here, leftist Democrats do not want Trump back in the White House? Period. Full stop. Is there any doubt about that? I mean, and they'll do anything it takes. Legal, illegal, you name it, they'll do it. That is their ultimate goal. There's no policy goal here. There's no help in America. There's no wealth and prosperity and happiness. There's no bringing people up from low incomes to high incomes. It's to stop Donald Trump.
If you're over 50.
I'm not sure about that. I think their goal is, like you said, to create chaos. And I think they'd like Trump to run against Biden. I think that they think Biden will win again.
Democrats who would like to drive him from the political scene completely because of Trump derangement syndrome, and they consider him very dangerous and so forth. But I actually think that the most Democrats who get involved in this kind of thing, they actually want to run against Trump because they think, whether they're right or wrong, people can debate, but they think they can beat him. And so they are actually trying to help him by generating the support of his base, and they feel that that will generate their own turnout. And so they're essentially, I think, playing for a repeat of the 2020 election.
I mean, I think the Democratic Party can't figure it out. Half the Democrats think Trump is the easiest guy to beat in the general election. The other half fears so much that he might win the White House. I don't think they can quite figure it out. You can't have it both ways, but you and I can let them decide that. We don't have to decide that, at least not this evening. So, Bill Barr, where does this lead? Now we're prosecuting a former president on very dubious grounds, really small beer, whatever the technicalities are. Where does this lead? Where does this take this country?
Well, to me, this is a fateful step. I've often complained about the use of the criminal justice process in the political realm, but this is, to me, there's no better. This is the epitome of the abuse of the prosecutorial power to preempt political decisions and sow discord in the political process. And I think it's going, we're going to rue the day we cross this Rubicon. There'll be more and more of this. And, it just doesn't end well. It doesn't end well.
It really, I think it pulls the fabric apart. I mean, the country is already split. It's already divided. I know there's different motives here. I'm sure there are some Democrats who are still moderate Democrats who have a different point of view than their brethren on the far left. I mean, Bill Barr, how's this look to people in Britain, in Europe, in Latin America, in Beijing, for example, in Vladimir Putin in Moscow? I mean, how's this look? Or is nobody thinks about that stuff anymore?
I think it makes us look like a banana republic, and it should. Now, this is New York State, and New York State has been acting like a banana republic. They had that civil lawsuit against Trump and his children, that civil lawsuit brought by the state attorney general. That was a political hit job as well. This ratchets that up because it's a criminal case. And, these cases together, to me, mean the breakdown of the rule of law in New York State.
How about the breakdown of the rule of law? How about the politicalization of the rule of law in the whole country, Bill Barr?
That's been happening. All our institutions, Larry, are being politicized. All of them: the media, science, medicine, education, and people aren't doing their jobs in those institutions. They are pursuing a higher political agenda, and so they sacrifice what those institutions should be all about. And so we see that now with the breakdown of the rule of law, where people will decide cases not based on principle and not with a blindfold on, regardless of who it is who's in the dock. They are trying to use the law as a political tool.
And Bill Barr, last question, because we're old friends and I always respect your wisdom. How in God's name can we stop this very bad trend and lift this country back up?
Well, I always say we have so many problems, it can be daunting. But I know the first step back, and the first step back is the step you and I took back in 1980 together when we worked for Ronald Reagan, which is we have to win. The Republican Party has to paint a positive vision of where we're going to go in the future, and we need a strong leader who can take the country there and win a decisive victory. Remember, when Ronald Reagan ran, the liberals looked as if they were in charge of everything. And then a few years later, liberal was a dirty word because the Reagan administration was so successful.
I think that they are sort of on the money there with their perspective on what this lawfare is doing to America. I do want to run a little bit of CNN stuff. The reason being, I'm no fan of CNN, but they think you're nuts. They think anybody that believes in freedom, I think, is nuts. Just their perspective is different, but to understand where things are at politically, it's important to look at all perspectives. Their slant on this a little bit different. Just check the tone in this report.
It didn't take long for House GOP leaders to rush to Donald Trump's defense.
I've said from day one, this is a political stunt.
attacking Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg over the unprecedented indictment of a former president on criminal charges.
I have zero trust that this will play out fairly.
Today, Bragg's office pushing back. In a scathing letter to 3 House GOP chairmen who have sought his testimony and internal records, accusing them of doing Trump's bidding, and writing, as committee chairman, you could use the stature of your office to denounce these attacks and urge respect for the fairness of our justice system and for the work of the impartial grand jury. But House Speaker Kevin McCarthy says that Bragg will be held to account. Sources say Trump is expected to be accused of falsifying business records to cover up 2016 payments to adult film actress Stormy Daniels to keep quiet allegations of an extramarital affair. But no one has seen the evidence prosecutors have uncovered.
Mr. President!
Though that didn't stop one congressman to claim the prosecutor could have indicted the ham sandwiches he was handing out on Capitol Hill.
So I know how to spot a pile of garbage, and this thing looks like a pile of garbage.
Even without seeing the evidence, you're certain he's innocent.
I'm not certain of anything except this. This is the first time in the history of the country we've indicted a president. And the fact that, he's just now announced and they rolled this thing out, it smells pretty fishy.
Top Republicans agree, despite not seeing the charges.
Aren't you jumping to conclusions? I mean, he may have broken the law. Does that concern you?
We don't think President Trump broke the law at all.
But there has been silence from Senate GOP leader Mitch McConnell and his number 2, John Thune, who told CNN earlier there were legitimate questions about Bragg, though he would not align himself with House GOP efforts.
Do you support House Republican efforts to call Alvin Bragg up here and get him to testify?
I'm not going to get into what the House is doing there.
2 other members of Senator McConnell's leadership team did come out and criticize Alvin Bragg. That's Senator John Cornyn and Senator John Barrasso. Cornyn, Barrasso, and Thune all seen as potential successors to McConnell down the line, and also some other reaction and some others warning against a rush to judgment. That coming from Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, one of the senators who voted to convict Donald Trump at his second impeachment trial, saying that she's monitoring the situation. Everyone deserves a fair legal process, but she says we should evaluate the evidence as it becomes available, showing the divide once again that exists over Donald Trump among Republicans on Capitol Hill.
All right, Manu Raju, thank you so much, Manu. Let's turn now to CNN legal analyst Carrie Cordero and CNN senior law enforcement analyst Andrew McCabe. So, Carrie, walk us through what this is going to look like when Trump appears before a judge on Tuesday.
Well, it's a big question because this is such an unusual and unprecedented situation. So I think at this point, we don't know exactly what it will look like because it has the potential, of course, to be an enormous spectacle for the country. If the former president wants to talk to microphones, if he wants to wave to supporters, depending on how the court and the judge actually handles the processing of him. So a lot, I think, depends actually on the security precautions that go into place and the interactions and the planning and the coordination that takes place between the Secret Service, which is responsible for the former president's protection, and the court security and the New York Police Department. And those law enforcement agencies really are going to play a big role in terms of what we actually see on the public side on Tuesday.
Yeah, there's a lot of coordinating right now ahead of Tuesday for that very reason. Andrew, Trump's lawyers are saying they're going to file a motion to dismiss. Do you think they have a strong case to do so?
Well, I'm quite sure they will. I'm sure there'll be a lot of pretrial motions that'll end up delaying any progress in this case as it goes down the road. I mean, I think there are many potentially challenging legal issues baked into this case. We don't know exactly what the DA has charged the former president with. We'll find that out on Tuesday. But I think most commentators believe that it's founded on charges involving false business records, which may become felony charges if the falsification is done with the intent to cover up or commit a second crime. It's where that second crime comes in that there's all sorts of questions about whether or not you can use as a second crime, for instance, a violation of federal campaign finance law, which is one theory that the prosecutor might have used here.
And we are seeing now tonight, and this is breaking, that at least one of those charges will be a felony. That coming out from Jack Posobiec at the Post Millennial, and that just minutes ago I don't know, honestly, if this is true, but this is what is being reported. And I think there is probably some weight to this, some merit. It says here in the post-millennial, President Donald Trump was indicted Thursday by a grand jury convened in New York by DA Alvin Bragg and faces at least one felony charge as a result. Bragg has not released the charges, though it is believed that he is determined to raise I think that's misdemeanor charges of falsifying records to the felony level with the idea that those alleged crimes are the foundation of further crimes. And I don't think this report, which just came across the screen here for me just minutes ago, really provides anything much in the way of new information. I think it's really repeating what was said on CNN, but just trying to elevate it and get clicks, honestly. So it looks more important than it really is. But I still think that there is merit to this. I think they will try to turn this into a felony, obviously, in order to justify they want to do it. They need to have something serious to charge him with in order to justify all of this, in order to indict him. So yeah, they're going to take it as far as they possibly can. And this is all, of course, related to that $130,000 payment to former, porn star Stormy Daniels. Also, I guess there is some new investigation or ongoing investigation that is now covering an additional payment to former Playboy playmate Karen McDougal. But if you recall, if you think back to 2016, they interviewed McDougal. And she, I think they thought they were going to get Trump with that interview with her. But she actually, I think she has feelings for him. In that interview, I don't think it came off the way that they were hoping. She wasn't attacking him at all. She had her heart broken. That interview with her didn't strike the tone that Trump's opponents were hoping for. That's why they don't keep wheeling her out. There's talk about looking at the paperwork on money that was given to her as well. But that was a different deal again, because they paid, as I recall, through the National Enquirer, a fee to her for the rights to her story. And they still own that. So she can't tell her story or sell it for a book or to a magazine or a media outlet, for a movie. They own it. And that's what they call a catch and release strategy. You pay for the rights and then they never published the story. But she did do an interview. And it looks like that was more of a romance than anything else. So yeah, it doesn't have the seediness to it that the Stormy Daniels saga has. And remember the award they gave Stormy Daniels? I think it was in New York City. That was bizarre. Who gets an award for that? Well, Stormy Daniels, I guess. Let's take a break. And when we come back, we'll dig into some other politics. I think I need to go scrape the scuzz off and have a shower between now and then. I'm feeling just a little bit slimy.
Maverick News presents The Rick Walker Show. Defrag your mind.
The New World Order. Government overreach. The Great Reset. Mainstream media lies. Now more than ever, independent voices are needed. Donate now at freedomreporters.com. That's freedomreporters.com. Maverick News, the antivirus program for your mind.
See this lady? She was in a parking lot. A man spoke to her. She made a video about it. Now it's going viral. We're jumping around here a little bit. This is not what I would describe as a traditional news story lineup. Normally, this would kind of be something you play at the end. But this, I think, is a statement on today, on where we're at in today's society. So I want to run this. And if we get to the phones later, maybe you want to comment on it. It's strange. Just listen to what she says.
I'm literally shaking right now because I just had a man approach me in a parking lot and it went fine. And I'm going to tell you why it went fine and how to address it, because it was in a book I read and this is how you're supposed to address it, but it scared me. I'm literally shaking. So this guy, I'm alone with my son, by myself, a woman, and a male approached me in a parking lot. He's, "Excuse me, miss," and I don't know why in the hell he was approaching me or what he was trying to do. And before he was probably 30 feet from me when he said, "Excuse me, ma'am." And I turned around and I literally yelled at him and I said, "Do not approach me." And he immediately started going in the other direction. And I just kept saying it over and over and over. I said, "Do not approach me. Do not approach me." And he, of course, got "What the F?" He started cussing and yelling, what's your problem? And I looked at him and he actually then crossed a couple cars down from my car. He didn't come anywhere near me. He crossed a couple cars down from my car and was like, continuing to cuss and say, "What's your problem?" And I said, "You do not approach women in a parking lot." I just kept saying, "Do not approach me. You do not approach women in a parking lot," yelling it. No male should ever approach a woman in a parking lot, ever. No male should ever approach a woman in a parking lot. And if a male does approach you, you need to turn around and use the strongest voice that you can possibly use with them. Don't be polite. They need to literally screw off. No male should be approaching you in a parking lot.
Okay. That, I don't know if that's news. I guess it's reality. Is she serious? Is that real? Is that where we're at today? Women are so scared of men, or maybe they just don't like men. Is that what it is? She's afraid. Is she afraid, or is she just, I don't, that's sad. A little bit disturbing and kind of weird to me. I don't know, man. It's weird, but it does say a lot about where we're at today. I take my dog for a walk several times a day, as I talk about all the time. And when I'm out, you know what I've noticed? A lot of people just don't like to talk when you run into them on the street. I see people when I'm out and I'm like, "Hi, how are you?" Some people respond, some people don't. I sometimes walk right by people on the sidewalk when I'm just walking down the street and they don't even acknowledge that you're there. Other people do, some people do, but times have changed. When I grew up, everybody on the street knew everybody. We didn't ever lock our doors. The house was always left wide open, unlocked, never a problem. Neighbors looked out for neighbors. Everybody kind of knew everybody. We all socialized. I played with the other kids on the block. My parents knew all the other parents. There were some elderly people who lived on the street. There was one guy across the street. We used to call him Old Fuddy Duddy. He didn't like kids. So if I was out playing catch on the front lawn and the ball rolled across the street or something, if it went on his lawn, boy, you had to be careful going to retrieve your ball. He'd yell at you. Well, too many people like that out there today. But that video, it's gone viral. A lot of people have a lot of things to say about it. It's unfortunate. Fear, politics, division. Maybe we're all part of a big psyop where they've divided us, divided men and women to the point where now that woman doesn't even want a man to come anywhere near her within 30 feet in a public parking lot. If he does, he gets that. Any comments out there about this? I don't know. She's nuts, it says here. She's nuts. He was being polite. Excuse me? Yeah, I don't get it. Be one thing if he was threatening, you know. But yeah, nuts. I agree. Yeah, those were the good old days. And I have to say, I've got pretty good neighbors, but I live on a small street, and you know, we all know each other, and I've got really great neighbors here. So I'm very fortunate that way. It does feel to me like on my particular street, which is very small, that we're, you know, we all look out for each other. We watch each other's houses and everything. But when I walk out into the larger neighborhood, some people friendly, some people not, depending at certain times of the day. A lot of kids walking around out there because they're on their way to go catch the bus to go to school, or there are a couple of schools near here. You know, so they walk to school usually in groups, and there's lots of them out there in the morning. You know, so if I get out and if I'm walking the dog at that time, you know, I'm, hey kids, and some of them say hi, some of them don't as we walk by. But I don't know, you know, I just don't know. It's a little bit strange these days. And let's face it, you do need to be careful. You do need to protect yourself. You just never know who you're dealing with anymore, right? You see a lot of violence out there, especially in bigger cities. And I'm fortunate too, because I don't live in a really big city. I live in a smaller town, so it still has a small town feel to it to me. And I'm grateful that I don't live in a big city. I'm grateful that I live in a town like this. I don't really want to live in a big city. When I was younger, I thought I might want to live in a big city, but only particular ones, you know. Just don't like the traffic. I don't like the impersonal nature of it. I like the hustle and bustle of the bigger cities when I was younger. But I sure do appreciate living in a town where there isn't that much traffic. You can get around at any time of the day, get to where you want to go in just a few minutes, and not have to deal with huge crowds. Sometimes, certain times it gets a little busy, and even here there is traffic. But I'll tell you, I don't feel afraid when I'm out walking around on the street. I feel quite safe, and it still feels pretty Canadian here. So I'm grateful for that too. What else do we have lined up for you tonight? Enough of that lady. I wish her well. I hope she finds a better state of mind and a happier disposition. CBC News, they're reporting on this Rogers-Shaw telecommunications company merger. All the mainstream media now picking up on it. And yeah, Rogers is taking over Shaw, and it has been approved, but with conditions. What does it mean for consumers? Well, I'll tell you, I think it means higher prices in the end. So, the federal government of Canada has approved the multi-billion-dollar merger of Rogers and Shaw, but with conditions that Ottawa hang on a second here. I need to check something. I need to make a quick change here. Hang on. Stay with me. Okay, we had to get rid of that quickly. Okay. We're all right. I'm back. Sorry about that. Just dealing with some drama. So the federal government approved this multi-billion-dollar merger. These are two of the biggest communication companies in Canada. And in Canada, we have really an oligopoly of mega corporations that control the communications and media industries. Rogers and Shaw, two of the biggest, Bell Media being, I think, the biggest in Canada. But Rogers and Shaw now combining forces, merging. Huge deal. So as part of the deal, the vast majority of Shaw's wireless business, Freedom Mobile, will be sold to Quebec-based Videotron. Well, Freedom Mobile and its more than 2 million customers will move over to Videotron. Rogers will maintain a much smaller part of Shaw's wireless business known as Shaw Mobile, which operates mostly in Alberta and British Columbia. So this is pretty typical of what the Canadian Radio and Telecommunications Commission does. It's what the federal government does. Whenever you have big companies like this merge, they force them to split up the assets, move this company to that company, and competition in especially the cell phone market in Canada is an illusion, largely because these companies control it all and they all work together and they use each other's cell phone towers. They share the infrastructure. This company owns so many towers, that company owns so many towers, but they all connect. And when you're making these phone calls, they're bouncing off each other's towers and they're sharing the infrastructure. And there are only so many of these companies. And when you go to the store to buy a cell phone and a cell phone package, when you're looking at all of these different cell phone companies that you think are giving you choice, these companies are all owned by the same companies. So for instance, if you purchase a package from Virgin Mobile, that's Bell Media. If you purchase a cell phone package from Fido in Canada, that's Rogers. They're not different companies. All these companies are owned by the big companies. Freedom Mobile, as you just saw, is part of, what was it, Shaw, right? It's a little hard to keep them all straight. They have these different brands, and they even have separate stores for these different brands. Fido has its own stores, and they offer different packages and different rates and even different cell phones. It's sort of a sub-brand to Rogers. They offer sometimes slightly older phones, lower rates, but it's owned by Rogers. So you think you're getting something different, but you're buying something the same. And even if you buy internet service from smaller internet service providers in Canada, what you're really buying is resellers. They're piggybacking on this internet infrastructure and cell phone infrastructure of the big companies, which own the infrastructure and generally construct it, install it with government assistance. Your tax dollars subsidize the installation of fiber optics, cell phone towers, especially to rural areas where they help these huge corporations that are on corporate welfare. And then they take that infrastructure and they take that bandwidth and they resell it. They sell it to third-party companies that then resell it, sometimes at lower rates because they buy it in bulk at lower rates and then resell it to you, and usually at a slightly lower rate than you would pay if you bought it direct from the major companies. The point being, this whole industry is really controlled by a handful of really big corporations with the backing of government. And then when they allow these companies to merge, as they are right now, Rogers and Shaw, it reduces competition even more in an industry where you have very little competition to begin with. And that is why Canada pays some of the highest cell phone rates in the world. That's why Canadians pay so much. I know people, Canadians, who have US cell phone packages for a fraction of what they would pay in Canada, and they do it because the rates are so high here. That is a fact. At one point, the Conservative government, the former Conservative government under Harper, I believe it was, they wanted to allow Verizon to come into Canada to provide alternative cell phone service. They were going to set up like a parallel infrastructure. They were going to go head to head and provide competition, open up stores. It was going to inject more competition. And what did we see as a result of that? We saw unions combine forces with the big corporations that control the industry in Canada to launch a public relations campaign to convince Canadians that they didn't want the big bad American company Verizon to come into the Canadian marketplace, because that would be bad for them, because that would be an assault, an economic assault on the good Canadian corporations that had built all the infrastructure. And that isn't fair to let an American competitor come into the market and compete with Canadian companies that had treated Canadians so well. And it worked. They convinced Canadians. They really got people jacked up and opposed to the idea of any kind of competition from the United States coming in there. They wanted to keep the industry Canadian. As a result, we all pay more. It would have created, in my estimate, in my view, more jobs. It would have, because it would have created parallel infrastructure. Verizon would have invested millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, maybe dollars, setting up more cell phone towers, providing more service. It would have forced the other companies to provide better service overall. And look what happened with cell phone service when everything kind of went down there a while back. And then the federal government was scrambling with the corporations saying, wait a minute, you better be providing better service from now on. And it became a big issue for Canadians. Why aren't they providing better service? Well, maybe because there isn't enough competition to keep them on their toes. They're complacent and soft, fat. They would have set up their own stores too. So you would have had retail jobs, tech jobs, construction jobs. But no, Canadians didn't want it because they let the big corps and the big unions convince them otherwise. So we all pay more and get less. But hey, that protects the Canadian corporations. Yeah, they're so good to us. As they take our tax dollars for their subsidies, their kickbacks, their tax breaks and grants to lay the fiber optic cables and tell us that they're the heroes. I'm not very sympathetic, as you can tell. I know that investing in that kind of infrastructure, that there's a lot of money involved, but they make a lot of money. They make huge profits in that business, huge. On the backs of Canadians. And now, Rogers and Shaw, well, they'll be making even more. The government is going to force them to provide certain services like Videotron as part, as a smaller company, but as part of this deal, they'll have to offer 5G service everywhere that Freedom currently operates within 2 years. So the government is saying, you better increase service in some of these underserviced areas. And in Canada, that's a pretty big issue too for cell phone customers, because in rural areas and remote areas, cell phone service can be pretty sporadic, pretty thin. Canada's a big country. That is a big issue. That's part of the problem. But I think that's also, I think it was a misstep to not allow Verizon to come in here. And since then, it's been a deterrent to foreign investment in Canada on the communications front. Other companies don't want to come in here because they don't want to have to deal with that kind of public opposition to foreign investment. I understand why you want to keep it Canadian, but at the same time, I think consumers have to come first. And that service comes through competition, in my opinion. Videotron also has to offer service in Manitoba via an MVNO and increase the data allotments for existing Freedom customers by 10%. Yeah, I mean, the data packages here compared to the US, they're super expensive here. So losing some competition. Well, Shaw's mobile business and its more than 2 million wireless customers will move to Quebecor. Rogers will take over Shaw's media and cable assets, most of which are in Western Canada. But the industry minister, Mr. Champagne, says that those assets are already subject to numerous conditions. And he says here, should the parties fail to live up to any of their commitments, our government will use every means in our power to enforce the terms on behalf of Canadians, Champagne said, noting that Rogers is subject to financial penalties up to $1 billion for noncompliance of this agreement. So if they don't do what the government says and improve service, they'll fine them up to $1 billion as they face less competition. So what they're trying to do, or what they say they'll do, is use government coercion against the corporations to force them to provide better service to Canadians, because there will be a lack of competition that would force them to do it using the free market. But really, overall, these companies are going to end up making even more profits because there won't be as many companies to compete against. And even in the face of government coercion compelling them to provide better service, in the end, they'll really end up spending less and getting bigger economies of scale. You see where it goes? And over the long haul, the government requirements will diminish and the competition will never come back unless there's something that compels them to break up their companies and split them off in the future. That's always possible, but highly unlikely. Anyway, enough of the cell phone talk. It's a big deal for people, though. You know, that's how people communicate. And people rely on their cell phones. And when you're talking about that kind of money, it's a big deal. So while all that's going on with Trump and blah, 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 down in the U.S., across the United States, what's going on with Vladimir Putin? Well, Putin has, and I've just got some notes here, adopted a new foreign policy strategy. It sets the elimination of Western dominance in global politics as a priority. So this new strategy comes on the first anniversary of Russia's withdrawal from Ukraine's Bucha, according to mainstream media reports. Russia forces are facing opposition from Ukraine troops over control of the city of Bakhmut in eastern Ukraine. We know that that's a hot spot right now. And I don't think this should come as any surprise. In fact, this focus on U.S. dominance in the geopolitical world, trying to put an end to that by moving toward a multipolar geopolitical reality, making that a focal point of the Russian foreign policy, that shouldn't surprise anybody, but they're formalizing it now. And we have a clip for you to explain what that is all about right here. Let's take a look and get a perspective on this from overseas media.
President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, has signed an updated version of the nation's foreign policy concept with a focus on Western efforts to undermine Russia and aim at the Ukraine conflict. Putin explained that a key document had to be modified due to the drastic changes in the international landscape. The move was announced on Friday during a meeting with top officials of Russia's Security Council. For his part, country's foreign minister Sergei Lavrov gave the details of the new document, which states that Moscow will prioritize support for the integration processes within the framework of alliances in Latin America, Africa, Asia Pacific, and the Middle East in the pragmatic, non-ideological, and mutually beneficial manner.
And Vladimir Putin himself had this to say. This is him addressing exactly this issue, his new foreign policy priority. Today I signed a decree of the Russian Federation, concept of the foreign policy of the Russian Federation. Cardinal changes in international life have forced us, he says, to seriously adjust key strategic planning documents, including the foreign policy concept of the Russian Federation, which outlines the principles, tasks, priorities of diplomatic activity. And what is that about? It really is, in every respect, Russia's worldview, world political view, which is that they're a nation state, they're sovereign, they get to determine their own destiny, and they rely on the old international laws and the standards set thereof. NATO, the United States, they've adopted this post-World War II United Nations rules-based international order, and it's new, but it's their position, really, that this collective of nations gets to make up all the rules, not just based on international law and the precedents set over time through international law, but their laws, the laws they set collectively. You've seen this approach over and over again, even during the Iraq War, with the reference to the New World Order by George Bush. And they form a coalition, right, of allied countries to do the things that they want to do and find justification in what they do through that strength in numbers, and to some degree even immunity for some of the heinous things that they do when they inflict pain and suffering through war on other nation states, where they impose their will or use the people there. I think sometimes it's just cannon fodder for the military-industrial complex. Putin is saying no. Russia is a nation state unto itself. And they are now making that declaration of sovereignty, if you will. And I'm using those words myself. They're not his words. But I think essentially that's what it is. It's a line in the sand. And he's saying, nope. We get to determine the destiny of our nation, not a collective of other nations. We will not sign over sovereignty to the United Nations, an organization that rejected the proposed joining of Russia. When Vladimir Putin asked if they could join, they said, no, well, they're part of the UN, but not NATO. He looked at that some time ago, and it was rejected. They're not part of NATO. And I think that, honestly, every nation state should look out for its own interests and its own people, because most countries have a very unique culture. They have very unique needs for a variety of reasons, a wide range of reasons: cultural, economic, social, environmental, health issues that are unique to each individual country. security issues that other nations maybe don't understand, history. So it's probably very appropriate for Putin, honestly, to put Western domination of other nation states front and center as a concern in his new revised foreign policy. That will set the tone as we move ahead. And it's very concerning, especially because we've seen, the arms control agreements fall apart too, right? So another step toward confrontation. But there's a right and a wrong, and what's needed and what other people want for you. And it's about sovereignty, the right for every country, the people of every country, to determine their own destiny. And it's kind of strange, isn't it, when you hear Biden and other NATO leaders stand up and say, well, Ukraine needs our help because they are their own nation state. They should determine their own destiny. We are fighting for democracy in Ukraine. That's why you, the people, need to support the war. But when Vladimir Putin stands up and says, Russia is its own nation state, and Russia reserves the right to determine its own destiny. We are a sovereign nation, and we will not be dictated to by a collective of Western nations. We get to determine what the future of Russia shall be. We get to determine what our laws will be, what our policies will be. When he says that, they say that's criminal because it flies in the face of the new world order. The irony.
Maverick News. Fighting for freedom. Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
So I want to talk about this story. I'm not going to spend too much time on it because it is provincial, and some of our U.S. viewers may not entirely relate to it, but it is sort of a Canadian version of what Donald Trump is going through. This is Premier Danielle Smith, Premier of Alberta, leader of the United Conservative Party out there. And she is heading into an election. Their main opponent, the New Democratic Party, which is pretty far left socialist. Well, she was campaigning to become leader of the party and the premier. She was making promises to I guess, provide amnesty or look at providing amnesty for especially, well, for people who were charged under pandemic measures, pandemic rules, especially pastors who are arrested. Well, a phone call between Danielle Smith, the premier, and Pastor Arthur Pavlovsky, who has become something of a media personality himself after having been arrested multiple times and facing serious charges, especially charges related to a speech that he gave during the Freedom Convoy protest just over a year ago. He spoke at the border crossing in Coutts, Alberta, which is on the border of Canada and the US, where protesters were demonstrating there. And he spoke to the demonstrators and was subsequently charged in relation to that. Anyway, he's facing possibly years in prison if convicted on these charges. And he had a conversation with the premier about his situation, and her political opponents are trying to make political hay with that. And do two things. Show that, one, she never really understood the legal process, the way the legal process works in Canada, suggesting that she thinks it works like it does in the US when it doesn't. And I don't really think that's true. The second thing that they're trying to assert here, I think, is that she was trying to influence the legal process, which is entirely improper. And if it were to be the case, it could lead to her resignation, force her resignation as premier. Again, I don't think that's the case at all, based on what I've read, seen, and heard, including this conversation that was released, leaked to the public through this CBC report. Let's listen to some of what that conversation sounds like. This is her talking to the pastor and his lawyer.
As well. So
that's his lawyer speaking.
So, Premier, I wanted to just introduce this concept because I think, you know, the UCP is not Arthur's enemy. It's the NDP. But he does have a problem that he thinks you may be able to help out with. So, Arthur, take it away.
Arthur, nice to talk with you. I'm not sure if you've ever had a chance to talk before, but I've been watching your public advocacy for many years, so it's nice to connect with you.
Well, we had an opportunity to talk to each other during the Wild Rose forming of the party many years ago, but if it comes to the latest ordeals, no, this is the first time. So I thank you so much for taking this time and listening to what is happening. As you are aware, I am still on house arrest, facing 10 and a half years of imprisonment for my speech in Coutts. And of course, that's very concerning to me because I came to a conclusion that I don't think I have an option except to start swinging your way because of the promises that were never fulfilled.
Well, I have, we're in a bit of a bind because of what happened with Jody Wilson-Raybould and the Prime Minister. Because what we discovered in how our justice system works is I don't really have the power of clemency the way a U.S. president or a governor in the United States has. It's not quite the way our system works. Once the process is underway, I can ask our prosecutors, is there a reasonable likelihood of conviction? And is it in the public interest? And I assure you, I have asked them that almost weekly ever since I got started here. There have been a number of cases that have been abandoned at the last minute as they've gone through that assessment. And I'm very hopeful that that will be the case for more cases. But there isn't really a mechanism for me to order them to drop cases. It's complicated that way. It's just the way our legal system works, I'm afraid.
So here is the update on my case. I was hoping that the Crown prosecutor is going to do the right thing. However, he did. His name is Johnston, Stephen Johnston. He's from the Special Force of Prosecutors in the province of Alberta. He dumped on our labs over 1,000 pages document and hundreds of hours of testimonies to frustrate our defense. So the trial is in 3 weeks. I'm facing, like I said, a number of years if they would have their way. And instead of sitting down and resolving the problem, we had to hire an entire legal team, which will cost over $150,000 extra to come through this massive additional disclosure that we never had before. So obviously, the Minister of Justice, Tyler Shandro, is playing a game here, trying to cause us more harm and more grief. And Johnston is just following his directives. So I'm a little bit confused.
Let me check on that because I don't think it would be from the minister. I think the issue is that once the ball is rolling, these Crown prosecutors seem to be very independent, and we can only ask them 2 questions, as I mentioned of you. So I doubt very much that this is being driven by the minister, but I have also raised it with the deputy minister and let him know my dissatisfaction with the tactics. So can you just leave this with me, and I will make that request one more time. My principal policy advisor, Rob Anderson, who's been doing most of my work with justice and pushing this along, he's not back from vacation until Monday. So we'll see if we can revisit that this week. We did just have a case, and Ezra told me about it, that there was a case where they did something along the same lines, huge document dump, and then they just abandoned the case. They didn't prosecute it the next day. So I'm watching to see evidence that they're going to come to this judgment that many of these cases are unwinnable and not in the public interest. And I'm beginning to see some signs that's the case. I haven't seen anything in your case yet, but if I can just maybe make that inquiry one more time, but I'll need until next week to be able to do that.
Okay. I'll be looking forward to what you have, what you are able to find out.
Yes, I'm very sympathetic. I think this is very frustrating to me that we find ourselves. Everybody has moved on from COVID, and we're dealing with a bunch of charges. And this is the thing I find very frustrating is that it was a political decision that initiated this, but it can't be a political decision to end it. That's what I'm finding very frustrating about the whole thing.
Have you ever considered of going public, like you promised at the very beginning that you're going to meet with us, pastors, and there's going to be dropping of the charges and recompensation? Have you considered meeting with us publicly and saying, hey, let's move forward and enough of this witch hunt?
Let me talk to Rob about that. The problem is that's how the Prime Minister got himself in such hot water, is because he was in a position where he asked the same questions that I did, and then his Attorney General said, actually, it is in the public interest, and we are going to prosecute. And then he kept trying to push her to make a different decision, and then he ultimately fired her, and it just blew up as a big political issue because it's just not. We just have these conventions in our system, so I am trying to stay within the lines of asking them the appropriate questions. And the further we get away from the original decisions, the harder it is, in my opinion, to make the case that this is in the public interest or that there's a reasonable likelihood of conviction. So let me talk with Rob. I do rely on him since he's a lawyer. I do rely on him to give me some sound legal advice to keep me out of the ditch. So I don't want to commit to anything until I know what is actually possible. It's unfortunate that I didn't understand the limitations. I thought we probably had the same power of clemency that they did in the U.S. can understand we have a lot more limitations. I'm not a lawyer by training. And that's, I can tell you, it's been very frustrating for me over these last few months because you're not the only one. There are many others, doctors as well, that I'm fighting this internal battle on too.
But I was contacted by a lawyer, Leighton Gray, if I remember correctly, and he told me that he advised you that there is already a victory in a court with NDPers when they brought the masking. And based on that victory, you can stop the prosecution immediately based on the judge's decision. And he said in that circumstances, you would walk out as a hero without taking a political hit because you would rely on the judge's decision that has already been made.
No.
So let me get Rob to. Sorry, we've just had sort of these competing days off. So I was away, then he's away, and I'm back, and he's not back yet. I did see that I had received a note from Leighton in December. So let me see what I can do to run that by somebody who has kind of some legal training, and I'll see. Because I can't quite figure out how I would use that, but maybe it'll be a bit more clear if I run that through with Rob. So just give me a few more days to circle back on this, and maybe Dr. Modry can connect us again next week.
Okay, so
I just point out one thing as well. I did see that communique from Leighton as well, and it did seem as though that there was precedent that you might be able to rely on. My only suggestion would be it might not be a bad idea, Premier, to connect Rob and Leighton together. Okay. And I think that would be quite helpful. I think in this because like Arthur has just said, and you have, you said, there are many others that are caught up in this, and I think there's a number of physicians that would love amnesty as well.
Fantastic. Let me circle back on that. As I said, Rob, I think is back on Monday. So, sure. And we just had a very busy fall session. So let me see what I can do because I had hoped that some of these would have been vacated by now, and I'm sorry to hear what they're putting you through. So Dr. Modry knows how to reach me. So we'll do this. We'll do this again when I've had a little bit more chance to talk it through with Rob.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Don't go away yet, Danielle. Okay. Arthur, I don't think is on the call, but let me do this. Let me hang up and call you right back. Do you have time to link in with Randy for a minute? Randy Royer?
The end. I don't think she said a wrong thing. She told him she can't intervene or influence the process dealing with his particular case. End of story. She can look at it. She made no promises. And I'll tell you, politics is a blood sport. Dirty, dirty business. How did that recording get leaked? 3 people on that call. The premier, Pavlovsky, the pastor, and his lawyer. 3 people. 3 people had access. Who released that to the CBC? And why would they do that? I don't know. But I can tell you it's probably not the premier. The extended phone call with the premier was not offered up as far as I know. So it seems unlikely it was the lawyer. The lawyer releasing it, leaking it to the media probably would be very risky for him. Might even be a legal issue for him because it could put him in jeopardy, I think, with regard to his obligations to his client. It seems unlikely it would be him. Then there's a third person that it might be. Why would that person do it? Interesting. Very interesting. Politics, the way it's being played out right now, speaks volumes to me. Don't judge people by the political facade that they wear. Don't judge political and public figures based on just what they say. Judge them by their actions. Through their actions, you will find their true intent. More going on there than meets the eye, folks. They're out to get her. They want her gone. She's a huge threat to the woke left. Make no mistake. They're trying to make political hay with that, score some dirty political points. But I'll say this, I don't think she said a wrong thing. She's not in the weeds there. It sounds like there's something there, but there isn't. Legally, I think she's on solid ground. She's quite within her rights to look at things. She made no promises. She's only asked the two questions which have been deemed to be appropriate, as far as we can tell. And it is not wrong or illegal for her to ask those questions even weekly. She's the premier. And no question there was politics involved in the implementation of these pandemic measures to begin with. The charges that were laid were as a result of all of that. So there were political influences in play when the pastor was arrested. And we don't have all of the information surrounding his case because it hasn't gone to trial yet, or his cases. I'm very interested to find out what all of the information is on his cases. And I would like to know exactly how he reacted, what he said when he was arrested. I'd really like to know the kinds of things that he said when he was in jail. I see commonality, a thread that runs through a lot of these cases. And sometimes things are not as they appear to be. I think in this particular case, Danielle Smith is the victim. She was targeted. Beware. Beware. Danielle Smith is in a pretty tough spot. She's got a hard job. Yeah, she made some promises. Now she's in power. It's hard to keep some of those promises because now she's facing political reality. But overall, I think she's still doing a pretty good job. Doesn't help when somebody's got a knife out or some people have knives out and they're sticking them in your back. Hear what I'm saying? Don't go away.
Fighting the Great Reset by leading the Great Resistance. Maverick News. The antivirus programs for your mind.
Okay, here's a story that Canadians and our US viewers will take extreme interest in, I think. And it's a story that isn't getting a lot of play in the mainstream media. It did get some attention. This is about the MK Ultra mind control program that was run by the United States government and the CIA secretly back in the 1950s and the 1960s really from the 40s right through to the 60s, but heavy duty in the 50s. And as I understand the program, they were using hallucinogenics, LSD, sleep deprivation, shock therapy to screw with people's minds, to try and control people's minds. They were trying to break new ground in that way, and it was all focused on, military applications, political reasons, and they destroyed some people's lives. So back in 2019, there was a class action lawsuit that was launched, but then the pandemic hit and the whole thing got stalled. Well, back in August, I guess this case finally was dealt with in the courts. And the US government successfully argued at that time that they should be granted immunity for the experiments that were done on Canadian soils as part of the MK Ultra program. So the US government did successfully argue in the Quebec Superior Court that the country couldn't be sued for the project MK Ultra, which was allegedly funded by the Canadian government and the CIA at the time. US lawyers argued that foreign states had absolute immunity from lawsuits in Canada between the 1940s and the 1960s when the program took place. This is one of the stories that was done this week on this by the Toronto Star. Other mainstream media outlets did pay attention to it as well. Survivors and their families of those experiments, which took place at Montreal's Allen Memorial Institute, are appealing the decision. So on Thursday of this week, a lawyer that represented the United States government told the Quebec Court of Appeal that the United States should be immune from prosecution and that any lawsuit against the US government should be filed in that country. Well, maybe I'm not an expert in international law or any treaties or agreements that might be in place, but I think that would complicate things immensely for any Canadian citizens that are seeking compensation because of this government-funded mind control experiment that literally destroyed some people's minds and lives and the lives of their families. What rights does a Canadian trying to sue the US government have in a US court? None, probably. Very few, if any. Good luck. I don't understand the decision that was made back in August, honestly, that said that that supported the position that the US government should be given immunity to this. So next week, we have a special program coming up. We have the daughter of one of the victims of that program. She will be on this program to tell us what happened to her dad, what happened to their family, and to explain what's happening with the legal process. A true tragedy. The other thing that makes it tragic is it was kept secret for a long time. And because it is so bizarre, so strange, that when you talk to people about it, most people are not even aware. And when you do tell people about it, they think it's a conspiracy theory. But it isn't. It really did happen. And you can see that they're dealing with it in the courts right now. It's a real thing. And the people who are hurt by this, again, in my opinion, they need help. They do deserve compensation. What they were doing to the people was horrific. And I think it laid the foundation for a lot of what's going on today. The psychological manipulation that we've been facing as a society. Even during the NCI hearings this week, just yesterday, Dr. Robert Malone talked about fifth generation warfare when he testified in Toronto at the NCI hearings. And he talked about mass formation psychosis. He talked about the use of social media, in particular Twitter. But the use of Twitter by the government as a weapon unleashed against its own people to get people to respond in particular ways and get people to do what they want. A lot of time has passed since the 1950s and the 1960s. What they do now is far more sophisticated. I think we're all being subjected to it all the time by advertisers, by social media giants, by government, by political entities, political parties, political groups, even foreign governments. All the time. You never know where it's coming from. And most of the time, maybe all the time for some of us, you don't even know they're doing it to you. That's what's so darn scary about it. And some of it is subtle. Some of it's just through pop culture and the way that they feed you information to influence your worldview, your perspective on issues. Some of the other stuff is absolutely super sophisticated, and it is aimed at manipulating you through your emotions, your lizard brain, that part of your psyche that dates back thousands of years and controls you in ways that none of us truly fully understand, but they do. So I look forward to the conversation with our special guest next week, who will be here Tuesday night. I think it's an important conversation because it will get something that, you know, I'm not big on conspiracy theories, as you guys know. But what I am big on is truth. And when there's something like this that is that important, I think it's, you know, I'm looking so much to that conversation because we are going to be able to deal with something as obscure within our culture and our history and our political sphere and our reality, that we'll be able to pull it out of that rabbit hole and deal with it in a very real, tangible way that will, like we say in that one promo that we run here, we pull people out of rabbit holes. So we'll be able to deal with this in a straight up fashion and give people the straight goods on it from someone who's actually been living through it since childhood. So really looking forward to it. Stay with me. More ahead right after this.
We are Mavericks. We say no to the Trudeau and Biden New World Order. And to bugs. Because bugs are creepy and gross. And people should not eat bugs. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Hey, no! To bugs!
So yesterday we told you about Bill C-11 being rammed through by Justin Trudeau's Liberals in the House of Commons. They stopped debate on it, jammed it through, So what are we getting from Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, the leader of the official opposition? A little bit of political theater, social media theater, but warranted, I think. So yeah, we told you about it last night, and then it actually happened. And we've got this follow-up now with this video of Mr. Poilievre talking about Bill C-11, the censorship bill, explaining what happens next.
All right, everyone, we've got some bad news. The Liberals, in coalition with the NDP and Bloc, have just passed the censorship bill out of the House of Commons. I'm here with the great Rachel Thomas, who's been fighting against this censorship bill all along. The good news is that the fight is not over. What happens next?
Well, what happens next? It goes back to the Senate. They will have to debate it there and determine whether or not they want to fight for the amendments that they felt were necessary to begin with. If they decide to amend it, of course, we'll see it back here in the House of Commons. If they decide not to amend it, then unfortunately it will go forward and become legislation.
Okay, so this is the way it bounces to the Senate. We have some real free speech warriors there, led by Leo Vassakis, a great Spartan warrior who held the thing up in the Senate for almost a year, good part of a year. He's going to go back to the Senate right now. He's going to fight like hell to stop it from passing it. If it does pass, though, then we're going to look for other ways to challenge it and fight it. We're going to fight against the CRTC to make sure that we limit their ability to censor what you see and say online. And we're going to have some creative ideas to help you go around liberal censorship. One of them is by signing our petition now. Not only will that add your voice to the fight for free speech, but it will allow us to go around the censors to contact you directly. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so important for Canadians to have their voice heard on this as well. It can be heard. Because we do know that this bill is all about censorship, and the government is putting control over the CRTC, and they're going to determine what gets posted, what doesn't, what gets seen, what doesn't, what gets heard, what doesn't.
And they have to win. You can hear in the background a bunch of Bloc Québécois and NDP members celebrating the fact that they're going to be able to censor what you see and say online. This is the kind of sick thinking that we have among the three woke parties. They're celebrating that you're going to have a limited voice. The good news is we're going to fight back. We might lose the battle, but we're going to win the war for free speech in this country. We're going to put you back in charge of your life. We're going to make this the freest country on earth. It's the common sense of the common people united for our common home. Your home, my home, our home. Let's bring it home.
So not over, not by a long shot. Still going to the Senate, but boy, that jamming it through and ending, like just stopping the debate on it, that not cool. We're getting dangerously close to having that censorship bill passed, and that will have a direct impact on what you are allowed to see, how the algorithms on the internet work, where programs like this will end up in the search rankings. They'll push us down even further. In fact, they're already doing a lot of that. They're making it more and more difficult to find this program online. They're hammering on us and all the independent media. If you're mainstream media, you get preferential treatment by the social media companies, and the government will compel the social media giants to do just that, push them up to page 1 on the search engine rankings regardless. They'll prioritize that in the algorithm, give priority to the mainstream media and suppress the independents like this channel. So we'll have a direct impact on what we're doing here right now, tonight. So keep that in mind. We'll have to find ways to work around that. And of course, you can support what we're doing here by liking, sharing, and subscribing. That helps push us up in the algorithm. It forces the system to recognize us because it says, hey, a lot of people are liking this. A lot of people are watching and they like what they see. It tells their computer systems to push this channel up in the algorithm. So just by clicking the like button every time you watch on YouTube, it forces Google, their system, automatically to just give us a higher ranking. subscribing, that helps as well. Hit the notification bell so that you receive notifications whenever we post new videos, although they don't always send them out because they try to suppress it that way too. But that's the way every independent media outlet is treated. But it does help. So if you would consider doing that, we'd greatly appreciate it. Also, look at subscribing over on Rumble. We're growing over there. We're getting just about as many views on that channel as we are on, our main YouTube channel some nights. So we're making real progress there. And the algorithms there, I think, are in some ways fairer because we get a greater percentage of viewers vis-a-vis the number of subscribers. We have like 10 times as many subscribers on YouTube on the main channel as we do on the Rumble channel, and yet we get comparable numbers of views. So that right there shows you that they actually are reaching out to the people who subscribe to notify them when we put out videos, but they're not doing that on YouTube at all. And they're clearly doing it on purpose. So you can certainly support us in that way, just by liking, sharing, subscribing. Same thing on Facebook. If you share those videos, just share them out, share the links. And that really helps. Just keep this platform active. And the other thing that we're doing here, I think within maybe even the next week, is we're going to put together a forum for people who have had the Kool-Aid in the arm. We're going to have at least one doctor, maybe others, on. I was having a discussion with a good friend today. We can help put that together. And it'll be a call-in show. We'll have a panel of people, including at least one, maybe more, one doctor, maybe other healthcare professionals, who will be able to give advice to people who have had the Kool-Aid, who are concerned about what it means for their health in the short and long term, and what they can do to minimize any possible effects from it, and what kind of protocols they might follow to ensure that they keep their health. You can also support us by donating at freedomreporters.com. That takes you straight to the PayPal page. That helps us immensely. And we also have a Give, Send, Go account. You can support us over there as well if you're more comfortable using that donation system. Certainly appreciate the support that we're getting. And of course, there is always the super chats. And we appreciate the support we get in there. And I think that forum will be extremely positive and well received. And I think it's something that, I think it's something unusual. I haven't really seen too much of that online in a public forum before. So we could probably get a lot of people involved. And I think that if we get professional advice on tap, it can actually help some folks. So we'll use the platform for that purpose as well. Look for that within the next week or so. What else do we have lined up for you this evening? Oh, yes, the President of the United States, Joseph Biden. Oh, well, before we get to that, I should also mention that Pierre Poilievre did respond to the appointment of an interim ethics commissioner who has a direct tie to who else? The Prime Minister himself, Justin Trudeau. Here's Pierre Poilievre responding to that one. Here we go again.
What do you think about that? The fact that the sister-in-law of Mr. LeBlanc has been chosen as the interim ethics commissioner?
Well, Mr. LeBlanc, of course, was found guilty, just like his boss, Justin Trudeau, of violating the ethics law. And his solution to make sure he's not found guilty again is his name is sister-in-law. Maybe they can talk about liberal ethics violations around the Christmas table while they're eating turkey dinner as family members. This is the Liberal Party's become the family and friends party, where they name friends, family members to protect them from accountability for their corruption. And if you don't laugh about it, you'll cry.
Does this seem to be a pattern of behavior for the Liberal Party in terms of you mentioned family and friends selection? You have concerns about Mr. Johnston as well.
Well, they named a Liberal staffer to oversee the Emergencies Act Commission. They named the Prime Minister's ski buddy, neighbor from the cottage and member of the Trudeau Foundation, to look into the foreign interference. And now they name a cabinet minister who's been found guilty of breaking the ethics law. They named his sister-in-law to oversee ethics investigations. It sounds, what I'm worried about is that Liberals are going to run out of friends and family to name to these top positions. Thanks very much.
Name?
I'll say this, Pierre Poilievre, great speaker, witty. He's quick. He's a smart guy. He always has a good comeback. Joseph Biden heads to Mississippi, where he speaks to the storm damage down there. Now, I had that clip lined up. Maybe I don't. Maybe I've lost it. Hang on just a moment. Let me see if I can find that for you. Well, maybe what I'll do is I'll skip back to another story. Chinese election interference in Canada. There is a committee an ethics committee that, again, not getting much attention tonight, but they had officials from the Canadian Security Intelligence Service testifying there today. And they're saying that it's like playing whack-a-mole. It's a very serious situation, this Chinese election interference. They're talking about it openly. And they're saying that they've informed every government in the country that this is a problem. And then they came back today and they said that they have really serious concerns about the way the government's responded, which is, to be honest, pretty inadequately. This is Canada's equivalent of like the FBI. Yeah, the FBI. Maybe the CIA. More like the CIA. And they're telling the government, hey, we've got a problem here with foreign meddling in our electoral processes. We need to do something about it. And essentially, they're being told that the government really hasn't done much of anything. So they had two former intelligence officials there today, and they're calling for a complete transformation of Canada's security apparatus. They say they need this to counter expanding foreign interference operations that they say have been essentially ignored by Ottawa and the Trudeau Liberals since the 1990s. It's nothing new. So we're going to take you to the House of Commons Standing Committee on Access to Information Privacy and Ethics. And that is where today they heard recommendations from a new national and independent office with powers to investigate and prosecute acts of foreign interference. That's what they're calling for. They want this new office set up, and they want rapid adoption of other counter-interference laws that have already been implemented by Canadian allies, such as Australia, which is facing similar kinds of problems. But what did we hear today? Basically, all of this so far has pretty much fallen on deaf ears, and the only response that we've received from the Prime Minister thus far is to appoint a special rapporteur to look at the situation and make recommendations, and the Prime Minister is promising to do whatever is recommended by the rapporteur. So if the rapporteur calls for a full-up inquiry or investigation, he says he'll do it. But if he doesn't, then he won't, I guess. So let's go to that special committee and just dip in and listen to a little bit of what was said today.
It's a year I left. That's the year you're, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
But I might have been, no, yeah, 2017, October 2017.
Okay. So Mr. Barrett had mentioned a 2017 briefing that had mentioned that there was a substantial body of evidence that the CCP and their officials were pursuing a strategy to influence Canadian officials. Are you aware of what that body of evidence may be or what it would include?
I was working in a field office. I really don't know. I have no idea.
Okay. Thank you for that. Now, Mr. Chu, I wanted to, in about the minute or minute and a half that I've left, we've heard about the bill that you tabled about the Foreign Influence Registry. I'm wondering if you could, in 60 seconds or so, just expand a little bit about why you believe that would be an important tool to help restore some of the trust that Canadians need in their democratic institutions.
It will be consistent with what CSIS have been advising the leadership of our country, that sunshine is the best disinfectant. With openness and transparency is the best way to deal with foreign interference issues and also regain many of the lost trust of Canadians to the institution. Also remove, the political partisanship from all the issues. This information is used when it's most effective, when it's in the shadow, it's under the table, but also at the same time, by repeating itself, it's becoming more and more effective. And so by having a registry, allowing our society, the investigative journalist, to be able to look at that. For example, through my research, I was able to find that the Liberal Party of Canada had an entry in the United States FARA, the Foreign Agent Registry entry in 2019, fundraising among the Canadian diaspora there. So transparency like that would help definitely protect our institution's confidence.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kirk. Mr. Chu. Next, I have Mr. Baines for 5 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll be sharing some of my time with Mr. Fergus here. Mr. Stanton, I'm going to go back to you on this topic of the registry. One of the criticisms of the foreign agent registries, and several countries have had them, is that, and you've mentioned, I think that, there's the new tactic is the proxies have eclipsed traditional spies. So how do we address, so if foreign agents are using proxies to conduct their work,
right?
How can we enforce the legislation, or how do you broadly put the net on these Canadian proxies?
Well, here's the thing. The Security of Information Act is where we're going to get that enforcement. We're going to get that there's an actual legislative regulator you could use. The registry, and I know there's a lot of people want the registry, and I think it has merits. But I don't think it should necessarily be the priority towards the legislation. People that are going to put their name on the registry are people that are representing some foreign agency, whether it's a Canadian diplomat overseas, whether it's business, whether it's whatever, ideally so they're not going to get a fine. There are clandestine actors. If you want to link them to the United Front Work Department, they are not going to be putting their name on a registry. There's no box to tick. So a lot of the most damaging foreign interference activity is clandestine. So what it's really going to do, and I think a registry is good, is it's going to allow the government to have some control over lobbying and sort of kind of rein it in a little bit, where I would have to identify if I am representing a foreign country. But is it going to really blunt PRC foreign interference in our democratic institutions? In my opinion, it's not.
Thank you.
Two quick questions, and I know that I risk doing this, so I'm going to ask them both at the same time, and I hope that we can get the answers. They're very different questions. Mr. Junot Ketsua, everyone here has acknowledged that this issue has been going on for decades. When we formed government, we created NCCOP and CIRA, the Site Task Force, the Election Protocol and Rapid Response Mechanism, and the list goes on. Why do you think that these kind of tools were not developed by previous governments, although we all recognize that this was a long-standing problem? The second question, which I would ask, is probably to Mr. Wilczynski again. you had mentioned the importance of having diversity as part of the security establishment. It seems that we are always running behind because we don't have direct connections into the communities, diaspora communities who are subject to intimidation and pressure. What can we be doing? And are you aware of your former colleagues who are now in place seeking to deal with that issue?
Very, very quickly, I think it's a problem of culture. For too long, and it was mentioned by my colleagues during their thing, for too long, the Canadian governments have not developed the culture of security, have not developed the culture of warning the general population or warning elected officials of the temptations, of the danger that they will be facing. If you have access to power, you become a target. You are somebody who might be sort of approached and used intentionally or not intentionally, consciously or unconsciously. You will be used. Let's remember one thing. The Chinese wrote the book 2,000 years ago, The Art of War. Read Sun Tzu. It's right there. The how to use influence. They know exactly, and they're really, 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 really good at it. They became even better. So we have to develop a new culture.
So very quickly on equity, diversity, and inclusion within the national security and intelligence community. I know just a few days ago, actually, colleagues from the Canadian Security Intelligence Service released their...
So what I'm going to do is, I think that this session of that committee was doing some pretty important work today, covering some very important ground. There's a lot more where that came from. So I am going to, following this broadcast, I'm going to tee up that entire session and I'm going to broadcast it. I'll sign off and I'll come back on. Take me about 15 minutes or so to set it up. And then we're going to run that tonight at the end of this. So that whole thing is out there in a more public way, because it's out, but not very public. Not many people saw that today. You saw almost nobody sitting in the seats. And yet these guys, they're the top intelligence officials in the country. They have the inside scoop on all of this Chinese meddling in our electoral process, how it's happening, and not just in the elections, but just in the country in general, and foreign influence, and especially China. We shouldn't be surprised by this. Of course, they're trying to manipulate what goes on in the country. Every country does it to every other country. But if you have a democracy, we need to be aware of it. We need to try to minimize it, regardless of what country it's coming from. And you can't blame other countries for doing it. It's all, I mean, that's just part of the game, right? So it's going on. We need to acknowledge it. It's not a good thing, but we don't want other countries figuring out ways to undermine our democratic system. We want our votes to actually mean something, right? So I'm going to run it at the end of this so that we've got all of that out there. Yeah, but before we do that, Joe Biden, I've got his clip now. He went to Mississippi. Let's get the prez on. Come on, man. Let's go listen to what Joe had to say. This is him talking about storm
Governor,
aid for the people in Mississippi.
Thank you very much. You know, when I heard about the devastation here in Rolling Fork, the first thing that came to mind was I got to get a hold of Benny Thompson. It's his district. He treats it like his home. He's been a steadfast leader in every crisis I've worked with him on. And he's always there for his constituents. And he's been a great partner of mine. And the governor's right. The governor, I tried him earlier, but he was already out on the road. I couldn't get him right away. And to let him know, that made it clear that we'll do everything that's legally within my power to do to be of assistance to the people in this community. And Mayor Walker, I know this has been especially hard for you since you're not only the mayor, but you're also, and I mean this sincerely, the funeral director. It's been tough. You've had to prepare people to be buried who you were with, know well. And thanks to Sharkey County officials and local officials and first responders and community members who've worked around the clock, rescue survivors, they get people to safety and sort through the wreckage. But Jill and I are here to show our support. Unfortunately, I've been to too many sites like this over the last 2 years around the country. I probably, with the FEMA director, better part of 12 to 15. And I always see the same thing in America. When the neighborhood's in trouble, the whole neighborhood comes to help. Walking down the street here, being told by people the reason we were able to get through it, one family told me when finally the roof came off the house, we're under the bed, we came back down, all of a sudden it was quiet. Before I knew it, the Red Cross was out front. Before I knew it, and went on to talk about the neighbors that helped. And folks, I know there's a lot of pain, and that it's hard to believe at a moment like this community is going to be rebuilt and built back better than it was before. Resilience of this community has been remarkable. And I just want you to know, as you fight through this, you're not alone. The American people will be with you. They'll help you through it, and so will I. Multiple tornadoes tore through Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee last Friday night. The most powerful came through Rolling Fork. It stayed here just a little over 3 minutes. Just imagine, look at, I mean, I know those who've been through it know, 3 minutes. 3 minutes, this neighborhood is basically gone. Stores, everything gone. And the most powerful part of the tornado came through Rolling Fork. It stayed here and it had the effect, it was so devastating, unless you physically saw it, it's hard to believe. 13 lives lost. I met a number of the families earlier today, Jill and I, my wife and I. 300 homes and businesses are nothing more than piles of twisted materials mixed up with personal items that mattered so much. Teddy bears, family albums, clothes, dishes, basics of life, all gone. People still going through the rubble, seeing if they can find that picture of grandma or that wedding ring that was on the bureau or that special memento that meant so much to them. They get lost too. Some of this dysfunction and destruction that you're seeing here is going to take years to recover and rebuild. But we're starting now. When I spoke to the governor, he said what he needed most was a federal disaster declaration, so that the earliest hours of Sunday morning, I signed that expedited major disaster declaration, which gave you more access to more federal resources. With that declaration, we're providing funding to cover overtime for local emergency responders, to cover the cost of removing all debris, 100% of that cost. We're also authorizing cash grants for people who lost their homes, whether they own or rent, to pay for things that may not be covered by insurance, like temporary housing, home repairs for those who have homes still standing, or to replace lost personal property, like furniture and appliances and vehicles. You know, after talking to Benny and your governor, today I authorized the federal government to cover 100% of the cost for removing debris and emergency measures that are involved in keeping up here, by keeping shelters up and running and paying for every overtime for everyone. 100% of the cost, not for the state, but for us, for 30 days. And then after that, we're not leaving either. In the midst of all you're dealing with, I know that it's overwhelming. You got to figure out how we can help, what you need. That's why right now we have 300 federal personnel on the ground, including FEMA disaster survivor assistance teams, to ensure a well-coordinated response to get you the assistance you need. We're walking through damaged neighborhoods to find people in need and help them. They're walking through now. Going on, if there's any doors to knock on or people stand there just to find out where everyone in that house was or is. We're trying to make it easy as possible. So on Monday, the FEMA Disaster Recovery Center will be opening in four counties, including this one. So we'll be able to walk into a situation, explain your circumstance, let people know what you need, and learn more about how you can get the help as quickly as possible. Can't hear me?
Well, can't now because I'm turning your volume down. So they have about 300 people on the ground there providing assistance in that community. And yeah, so he's just announcing his disaster assistance program. And, that's the way it went down there today for Joe Biden in Mississippi. He slurs his words in ways that he didn't when he was younger. Shows his age every day. Anyway, that's the way it is. On this 31st day of March, that makes it the last day, right? Is that right? Yeah. Tomorrow, April 1st. April Fool's Day. Be careful out there. Be very, very careful. Thank you, everybody, for joining me here on the program tonight. As I say, I am going to sign off, take about 10, 15 minutes, get another broadcast set up, and I'm going to run that committee hearing today, that special committee dealing with the foreign election meddling and those CSIS officials, those top cops, Canada's equivalent of the CIA, talking about it. It's a real thing, not a conspiracy theory. It's the real deal. So I'll be back tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with a full program, and I'll be back in about 15 minutes too with that special broadcast on the flip side.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.